I am Joe Pardavila. This is the Forbes Books Podcast, and if you're not on board yet, prepare for a crash course on cryptocurrency, NFTs, and the Metaverse. And you won't even have to sign up for one of those masterclasses. My guest this week is LA-based tech entrepreneur Les Borsai, the co-founder of Wave Financial. We're going to talk about how he fell in love with crypto, how his team at Wave Financial bridges the gap between traditional asset management and cutting-edge technology, and why he's so bullish on the Metaverse. Hey, Les, how are you?
I'm really good today. It's a slower day, so it's good.
Oh, good. I'm glad I got you on a slower day. And one of the reasons I want to get you on is to pick your brain, because you are heavily involved in cryptocurrency and blockchain. And so talk to me about how that's evolved for you personally. When did you become involved in those sectors and what you're doing now with it?
Well, I became involved in 2013, and I mean, it goes back to kind of my history. And my history was entertainment. I worked in the music business for many years, which kind of evolved into technology and music. And I'm always kind of curious about what the next thing is. And when I had heard about Bitcoin, it was trading at $200 a coin. That was in 2013. And I'm like, I don't want to spend $200 on something I don't understand. So I said, I'm going to find the next Bitcoin. So I did a lot of research, and I was introduced to the guys at Ripple. And I really liked them. And I became an advisor for Ripple in 2013. And then kind of moving into 14, I muddled my way through the Ethereum presale, which, I wasn't really technically proficient, but I somehow figured out how to download a JSON wallet and use Geth or whatever the hell it was back then.
So what was the Ethereum price at the time?
I think it was 50 cents, somewhere around there.
And you did invest in it at the time?
I did.
Wow.
And,
so that turned out to be pretty lucrative. Of the time of this recording, Ethereum is up to $3,126. So you're doing good with that. And your Bitcoin, speaking of context, it's up to $41,800. So what is it about? You were obviously an early adopter. What was it about that's so attractive?
I think, to answer that, I grew up in Anaheim, and I think Anaheim
no need to explain any further. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Well, it's true. I mean, it's funny because, Anaheim, when you get outside of Disneyland, you see that just the influence and imagination kind of spills into everything, but it's kind of in a really weird, messed up ghetto way. God, did I just say that about Anaheim?
Yeah.
Sorry, Anaheim.
Yeah.
But like you'll see like the influence of the gardening and the influence of the magic of Disneyland spilling out into the city. And I think, I always had a curiosity about new things, new technologies, new innovations. And I mean, I even track it back to, when Sean Fanning and Sean Parker were, announcing and showing Napster, and watch the record companies just like slap innovation down. And that always bothered me. To further answer the question of how I got there with the cryptocurrency, I went into Reddit, and I just started talking to people that were building in the space. And that's how I ended up getting to Ethereum. And, from there, you can kind of daisy chain it. And go
it's a gateway drug, right?
It is a complete gateway drug. And you can go to Tezos and the first DAO. You can go to Filecoin and all those early tokens. Look, there's an old saying, though. The guys who got in early, they either lost it or sold it.
Right.
And that was kind of the case with a lot of guys who got in early. And there were guys that were way earlier than me. To really kind of answer that question, I'm just curious, and I'm still curious.
And you are a serial entrepreneur. So and I joked with you before we started recording how you have a lot of irons in the fire, have done a lot of things. With entrepreneurs, I know it's all about risk mitigation. But when it comes to cryptocurrency, the volatility is just all over the place. So how does your entrepreneur brain wrap around this sort of cryptocurrency entrepreneur, for lack of a better word? How do you reconcile those two things?
I mean, it's pretty easy for me, actually. To go back to the beginning, my first career, I was about 17, and I would either rent or borrow warehouses and throw parties. And it was for kind of the economics of throwing parties, meaning I needed to make a living somehow. And these kids would pay $5 or $10 to get into a party. And it was like, well, that's better than fast food. But that actually ended up going way deeper. And there were business models there with DJs that would pay a concert promoter a lot more money. So I ended up getting hired by the biggest concert promoter. So I think, when you take a look at the inherent risk of that thinking, If people turn up, you make money. If they don't, you lose money. But the margins were much greater. Back then, artists would take a lion's share of the margins where a DJ would take a flat fee, and a concert promoter could build a business around that. So that was kind of my initial thinking, but kind of living a lifetime of being okay with risk is the first part to your question. I'm okay with risk as long as it's mitigated by facts and diligence.
Right.
Now, when I co-founded this company with Dave Seymour had already been a venture capitalist for many years. He had sold an investment bank to China Capital. So he already had the part down where it came to diligence and understanding risk from a team perspective and an investment perspective. And what I didn't realize was kind of in my solitary journey that I could only get so far. And it wasn't until I collaborated with someone that I realized we could build something greater than both of us because we had different skill sets. I never understood that until recently, actually.
How did you come up to that realization? What was the aha moment, as Oprah used to say?
Well, I think there was this moment in time when, we were out raising AUM for the company and the number $100 million came up and I just realized, oh, wait a minute, maybe this isn't going to be quite as complicated as the barriers I put up for myself. And, in that time, our company that's been around 3 years, we formed at the end of 2017. And the first 2 years were incredibly difficult because of the market itself, the crypto market. And then all of a sudden, everything started connecting. And in that time, we're at $1.5 billion of AUM. So it was my own limitations in thinking that prevented me from seeing where we could really go. And the collaboration really helped us get there.
And I would be remiss without asking, what Wave Financial does. So let's elevator pitch this. If you and I were traveling one of those big buildings, not in Anaheim, I think they only go up to about 5 stories, but say in New York or LA, 10 to 20 stories, and I asked you what Wave Financial does, what would you say in a nutshell it is?
I mean, it's easy. It's an asset manager. And, there's really kind of a handful of things that we do and have. And that is, we have a couple of venture funds. One is the Cardano Ecosystem Fund. We have financial products that we structure. We have Borsai who comes in and creates a lot of these financial products. And then we do wealth management, treasury management for high net worths and protocols, and we're regulated. We've been a regulated investment advisor since day one. I think, from that standpoint, we're probably the biggest, if not one of the bigger ones in the space, and our growth will continue to take us in that direction. So it's like any other wealth manager, really, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But we have those additional functions of also being able to see what technologies are coming and support them by investing in them. We also, my baby is, we just launched the NFT fund, and I didn't want to do it, and my partners made me. I really didn't want to do it. So that's another thing that's performing very well, of course, because they made me do it and it's working.
All right, we'll get into NFTs in a moment, but I just want to dial back here a little bit because you said the magic word of regulation. And when I speak to folks in the crypto space, it's 60-40, 50-50 about whether there is regulation needed in cryptocurrency, in the world of cryptocurrency. And obviously the fact that it sort of regulates itself, it sometimes doesn't need it. But what are your thoughts on maybe government regulations when it comes to crypto?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the problem is, not regulating is a form of regulation. And I think when we look at the SEC, I think they're in that place right now. And I think they're going to figure it out. But I think anyone who wants the asset class to sustain and continue to grow wants regulatory guidelines. That makes it a lot easier. Like we have to use qualified custodians, for instance. That is, with some of the alternative assets. And, I don't know how far qualified all of them go. There's custodians we'd love to use, but, for us to not only protect the clients and adhere to, what it takes to be an RIA, we have to do things very specifically, like registering products that we launch in a Reg D format. So we were always just thinking kind of, how do we build something that's going to be ready for retail by doing it, a lot of things privately first, private fund structures. And that's a big differentiator. A lot of people weren't thinking that way. And look, there's companies out there like Grayscale and Bitwise and CoinShares, and they've done great. And a lot of them held on to their asset, and let it appreciate. And I wish I would have been that smart, where we just bought a shit ton of Bitcoin and sat back. But we didn't. We figured out really super interesting ways to build a company that is modeled after traditional finance companies. And to me, it's just like replace the asset. Okay, it's digital currency, but maybe it was a commodity last time. That took a while to get in place, and it might have been a pork belly. Who knows? At the end of the day, the finance of it, whether it's anything from derivatives or indexes, I mean, it's all the same. Although I don't know if there's a pork belly index, but I'm sure there is.
Yeah, probably. You alluded to it earlier, and you cut your teeth really in the entertainment industry and music. And I'm old enough to remember, and I think you are too, how the music industry was so slow to adapt to digital music. I mean, it basically crippled the industry for many, many years until they're like, oh, wait a minute, we could probably sell it online ourselves. Let's not have all these kids steal it. I don't know if you were around in the music industry at the time when that was going down, but do you feel like this is sort of part of your being, where I'm just trying to psychoanalyze you a little bit, where you're an early adopter in this, where you were in industry prior to that was like, I'm going to take our time getting into this. Is there anything there?
You're right about one thing. I saw a lot of innovation, and a lot of the people I worked with were like, yeah, let's protect our IP, tell them to go fuck off. And I never really took that approach. I was like, no, wait. This is great innovation. Let's figure out how to adopt it. Let's be partners. And, what ultimately ended up happening, I mean, and if you go back to, kind of the digital delivery of music, I mean, that is the one thing that the record companies, didn't own, kind of in a vertical integration. Everything prior to that, whether it was a 8-track tape or everything from the record player to the record was owned by the music companies, including the artist. So now you have these innovations happening that they're not supporting. And let's keep in mind, when the first streaming services really launched, they had done partnerships with all of those large companies. So the companies were incentivized to give the IP over. But it always bothered me. I wasn't on the side of, let's just protect our interests. So I think that's one of the things that really crafted the way I think. And if you also look at, the way artists would lend their name to so many kind of emerging technologies, and you can go back to iPhone apps, and you can go to websites, and you can go to SMS platforms. It was always kind of as good as the artist that was speaking about it. Now, what I love about this space, and I know I'll hold because I don't want to jump into Metaverse and NFTs quite yet, but I think, the truth is it did craft the way I think and what I think is important.
That's good. It's good to know because you worked with a lot of artists. One of my favorite was Jason Mraz, who I interviewed several times. And I remember the last time I spoke to him, it was years after I'm Yours, and it was and he just released another album, and I'm like, so Jason, just in all honesty, could you have retired just from the royalties from I'm Yours? And he goes, yeah, I probably could have, but I really enjoy making music. which is totally a very Jason Mraz thing to do. And now artists have more control now than ever, more than ever before, right? It's not like the 1950s where these artists were getting ripped off left and right.
Yeah, and going back to Jason, I was fortunate enough to work with a guy named Bill Silva, who's still a dear friend, and Bill kind of continued managing Jason. I was there for the beginning, and I think it was probably somewhere around 4 or 5 years. But
you were there for the Remedy? The Remedy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, and I was there for every label saying, no, we're not that interested until, one of them said we are. Yeah. And you could see what was happening with Jason. Just by playing in clubs, you could see that the audience would get bigger week after week because he was so charismatic on stage. But, the thing about Jason is he would have been happy just to stay in a club. It's all perspective. Yeah. And I think because he just loved what he was doing, it definitely led to his success in particular. But there's been a shift right now in terms of that control, and I think it plays into my bigger thesis on the whole space in itself. But I'll say this, without the support of the master holders and the publishers, it's incredibly difficult to drive real revenue and real kind of interaction on IP. And what's happening here that I don't believe they see is IP rights are going to transfer and they're going to work in a different way. When you buy something, you're going to have the rights. And that means you can monetize them depending upon how clever you are about monetizing them. I wasn't going to do anything in music. I've only done a handful of things in music while I've been in cryptocurrency and NFTs. But one thing I did do with the fund, which is called the non-fungible fund, is I bought the Blau track. And the reason I got it was I wanted to license it in a different way. I thought doing a Reg D offering would be really interesting, and taking that same piece of kind of beautiful music that Blau created and doing a lot of different kind of collaborations and only licensing into the metaverse because I'd own all the rights. And I ended up selling it back to someone else because the artist could make some more money an hour later. So I didn't get to do it, but I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to do, and it had nothing to do with the record companies or publishers.
Interesting. All right, so let's dive into NFTs and metaverse. First, NFTs. Why are you attracted to NFTs?
Well, that's easy. When I was young, I loved collecting things. I was probably the crappiest card collector on the face of the planet. I liked hockey cards the worst.
Hockey cards? Jeez.
Yeah, I know.
Those have zero, outside of like a Wayne Gretzky rookie card. Those are worse.
Well, I'll tell you, an Eric Lindros card doesn't have much value, poor guy.
Yeah.
But I bet an Ovechkin card or a Crosby do.
Yeah.
But, having said that, for me, it was the ritual, understanding what I was finding. And I think it goes back to my strange 87-year-old father's swap meet roots. He loved treasure hunting. And, collecting in a funny way was treasure hunting when he'd bring these things home and you'd be like, okay, well, what is that thing? What's that worth? And, I liked collecting watches and a whole bunch of stuff. And I found it just to be kind of a relaxing pastime, I guess. So I understood collecting. The music business allowed me to understand community and the benefit of being early. If you could get to an artist and sign them early.
Yeah.
And so all of those things were kind of already baked into me. I bought my first CryptoPunk in 2017. I lost that wallet. I don't know how I did it.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy. But I ended up keeping my crypto kitties. Yay. I wish that was in reverse. But when it kind of reemerged, I didn't look at it like NFTs were kind of reemerging. I looked at it like my curiosity came back. And I dove deep into this platform called Avagache. And I understood what NFTs meant to me anyway at that point. And it was much more than a collectible or a piece of art. I mean, I thought that had very little to do with it, to be honest with you.
So, because that's part of it, right? The collectability of it. Like you mentioned, you actually collected the one sports card nobody wants to collect. But why didn't you see the collectability in it?
Well, it's not that I didn't see the collectability. When I look, the thing I hate to do the most, and I do it all the time, is sell something. And I'm just like, shit, why did I do that? And I don't sell much, but I just did it again with the World of Woman, rare World of Woman I had. What really pisses me off still. But because I saw it as something else. I saw it as an extension of Wall Street bets.
Oh.
You're going, what are you talking about?
Yeah, the
Wall
Reddit
Street
thing.
bets,
Yeah.
NFTs. Well, these kids out of Reddit, they gamified banking. They went long, just to kind of stick it to the hedge funds because the hedge funds went after GameStop or whatever it was. So you take a look at kind of the DAO culture. And to me, what all of this is about is liquidity. And what I mean by that is, I collect art. And if I want to liquidate any of it, it's going to take a minute. I'm going to have to wait for an auction or sell it at a loss in a secondary if I need liquidity for some reason. So I looked at the value of all the DAOs, and then I kind of imagined what that would look like cross-chain and what that would look like connected kind of globally. And what I realized was there was an economy being built that functioned really well. I mean, if you look at the 6K to 10K drops, well, the reason they succeed is because of the speculative nature of the asset class. And really, if you take another look at this, it's innovation being paid for by itself. So I guess my overall kind of commentary on that is this generation doing for themselves, not having to do what the boomers had left them. It's kind of a heady, silly way to look at it, but it's really true.
Yeah.
The drops that work are the drops that have a robust community, great development team, great roadmap. And as those happen over and over again, I mean, where does everyone think the volume on OpenSea comes from? It's not from singular art pieces.
And so talk to me about these people that are getting on the bandwagon of NFTs. Everyone and their mother is offering one up. Does that sort of take away, you think, from some of the others? Like, is it one of those things where it poisons the well kind of thing when or do you think it is what it is?
Look, I don't think everyone can afford a $500,000 Bored Ape.
No.
And the same way, I don't think everyone can afford a $1.5 million Richard Prince painting. Bad example. Let's just say a Picasso.
Okay.
But you can go to Walmart and get a print. So when you think of an economy, you think of different levels for the economics of the community. And I think you're going to see that here. And you're going to see verticals like what Artifacts did with Nike. And you're going to see, this is the fastest corporate adoption I've ever seen. Coinbase just announced, with MasterCard, they're going to have something to do with NFTs and MasterCard and Coinbase. If you just take a look at Nike buying Artifacts so quickly, you take a look at the acquisition yesterday, Microsoft acquiring whatever it was, Activision Blizzard for like $70 billion. Everyone is looking to the metaverse. Now, the interesting differentiator for me there is people really look at Web3 and the metaverse and real life as these separate kind of destinations. And I just look at it as one thing. I don't think there is a distinction. And there's a gig economy emerging in the metaverse. When my nephew, who I taught how to do NFTs 5 months ago, at 14 years old, he just turned 15, has $63,000 in the bank. That didn't come from, he's not even old enough to have a job, actually.
Yeah, no, it's illegal.
So it's like he's able to do that because it's connected to a passion he really has, which is gaming. And look, I don't think he's that good in school, and I'll be the first one to tell him, this kid didn't know shit about math. And, all of a sudden, when you put money in the equation, the kid's a fucking genius. And again, I think that's just having passion and curiosity about what's out there. And he's now telling me more than I know, which makes sense, even with as many hours as I spend looking at this stuff.
Wow. So let's get into the metaverse now and early adopters. It's funny. When Facebook launched that whole thing and that goofy Zuckerberg video, it was a punchline. But then all of a sudden you see like the Apples and Microsofts and Epic and all these major companies like gearing up for the metaverse. It sounds like you're bullish on it. Why?
Oh, yeah. Of course. All you have to do is put on an Oculus Quest 2 and you'll understand that, that immersion is where it needs to be finally. And we've been hearing about the promise of VR for a really, really long time. But I think, again, this generation, and forget about the corporates for a minute, including Zuckerberg and Facebook. But I think, when you take a look at what an NFT can be, and I've said this before, so I apologize, this thing is not only my identity, in the way of a PFP, it can be a wallet, it can be a financial instrument, it can be an artifact in augmented reality. It can be so many things that live on so many platforms. So that's what I mean about the lines being blurred. So is the metaverse a thing? Of course it is. I want to go into my on-cyber gallery and show you what I have in the metaverse, using my Oculus Quest. I have a friend who lives in Indiana, and, I don't get to see him often. My other friend built this company called Forever VR. And this isn't crypto, and it's not blockchain. But he built a bowling game. So I went into this bowling game and I bowled with my friend who's in Indiana, and we were doing it once a week. And it was great to connect as an avatar in this bowling game. And if you don't have that experience, you can't have an imagination of where this stuff goes and why it's all interconnected and how play to earn plays into it. And, I was playing a gala game, and these guys are great. And I had done an NFT drop for a Vox collectible. And I kind of sold a couple of them, but I kept a couple, and they really increased in value. And I'm like, that's interesting. And they had launched this game called Townstar, and you could pull your NFT into the game and do play to earn because you have the NFT. This is just about melding concepts. And, a lot of innovation is going to come out of this because it doesn't need to be funded. They're self-funding.
And usually this kind of stuff is shouted from the rooftops by the early adopters like yourself and these companies we've mentioned before. But let's talk about like regular people, like the idea of buying this $200 Oculus headset or whatever, whether the brands that'll be coming out soon that'll be making these kind of headsets. will it be just as ubiquitous as your normal Internet 2.0 where people are accessing it on their phone and on their laptops and such?
Yeah. I mean, it already is. I mean, most of the things you can do, in the metaverse, which is being built for a long time, you can access a lot of these things through your computer and eventually, through mobile. I've seen companies that have all sorts of different access points. And that was always the frustrating thing about the Facebook announcement, changing their name to Meta. That's great. I appreciate it. But in a funny way, it's a little bit disingenuous. They've got a great product that they bought in the Oculus Quest. I wish they'd focus on that. They have a good platform for builders. But it's interesting because it's almost like going too far for me, because if you look at the tenet of Web3, last I checked, it's about decentralization, right to privacy,
right,
cryptocurrency.
And this is the opposite, right?
And they're the opposite, from kind of that ethos. And if they think that the kids that are developing, the Activisions of tomorrow don't know that, they're just wrong. And it's also going to be interesting to see, how Microsoft, I mean, look, I guess there's going to be, it's a little narrow-minded because I'm such a digital crypto NFT maximalist in some ways. But, it is narrow-minded to think there won't be just regular destinations in the metaverse. And I think that's what, like the Microsoft deal will cater to. Now, do I think those guys are going to do cryptocurrency and play to earn? And no, I don't think they'll ever take the reputational risk. I think I heard something about Ubisoft doing that, and there was a bit of a backlash, and they pulled it. Yeah, I mean, I'm rooting for the kids building, these new imaginative worlds and games and combining it all, because I think that's where it comes from. It comes from, these youthful ideas.
And help a layperson here, because this all came out. I mean, we've been talking about virtual reality and AR for years, but the metaverse has now kind of come to the forefront because of Meta, Facebook's announcement. Who owns the metaverse? Is it the internet?
I don't think it's because of Facebook's announcement. I mean, there's guys like,
I'm talking about mainstream less. I'm not talking about guys like you.
But you got to think Fortnite is relatively mainstream.
Yeah.
And when you take a look at the engines, Epic, Unreal, Steam, all that stuff, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, really, the world, I mean, they've been building it a long time. It's just at a place now where it's accelerating. And that's the hardest thing about all this, to be honest with you, is I swear to God, I must sleep like 4 or 5 hours a night because there's just so much information you're trying to digest. And, you have to start to think about things like, okay, well, the whole Web3 thing, how's that actually going to play in? And there's just so many different components that are being combined here. And then when you start to think about, okay, well, where am I going to have my game live? Is it going to be on Optimism or, I mean, Optimism's probably going to do the currency. I think in the case I'm thinking about, it's Starknet, where the game's going to live. And you've got all these emerging companies and, how are they going to make the experience great? And how's it going to be connected to the layer ones? And what do the layer twos mean? And it's just, you can keep going down that rabbit hole forever.
Got it. And so the metaverse, again, for a layperson, does anyone own it? Is it like?
No, I mean, no. You can, look, if you go in and you go to Decentraland, I mean, Sandbox, I mean, there are pieces that you can own, sure.
Okay.
But it's like anything else, what those people kind of throw out there that is available. I mean, those can come in limited quantities, and that's why those things accelerate in value. I'm going to get you an Oculus Quest. I swear, I'm going to send you one, and you can go have the experience. And look, by the way, you can enter the metaverse plenty of other ways. So
okay.
It's not just that. You don't need the immersive experience. It's just a cool thing.
Yeah, I've never put one of those on. I don't feel like honestly, you know what I think about? Me as a Gen Xer, I think about those cheesy 90s virtual reality movies, Lawnmower Man and Virtuosity. So to me, maybe it's just a bias that I've created in my brain. It's like, I'm going to put on these headset and I'm going to look at like these cheesy graphics that look like, that.
Yeah, it's not that.
Okay.
You are really missing out. You're going to send me your address after this podcast and I'm going to send you one because it was a game changer for me. Someone gave me one of these things and I felt the same way you do. Look, I'm apathetic. I'm Gen X. I get it.
It's part of our brand,
Les. It's part of our brand. Man. We work hard, but we kind of hate everything. I get it. We definitely have a criticism for everything. I live by that motto. You're going to give me your address. I'm going to send you one. And I'm going to tell you, when you go to do things like the Trip app, which is a meditative app, it's unbelievable. It's finally come come around. And, now we have the rights of IP changing and IP, being created kind of at breakneck speeds. And you can incorporate that into games and it can be completely immersive. And it's just a different time. The answer to that is the metaverse. If you go back to the history of it, it was created for a long time with lots of different people, and it has its corners. So once you're there, you can kind of see how it is emerging. I mean, look, go watch Ready Player One. We're kind of there, believe it or not, and I think people don't believe it. But when they get this device, look, I gave my dad, who has crappy eyes, I gave him an Oculus Quest 2, and he had the greatest time sitting in his chair, just leaving kind of the boredom of, the life that he has at the moment, because he's not out there walking around or doing things as much as he used to. And it's this really great thing that I could see people that are getting older in age use as an escape. It's really pretty incredible when you think about some of those applications.
All right. I think you might have sold me on it. And last on this, because we
send you one for free. That's something.
No. I mean, sold me on the concept, though. Lastly on this is, we've been talking about IP and now the metaverse. And you remember, as well as I do, the early days of the internet. It was the Wild West of people just pirating everything in their mother. Is there any fear of that in the metaverse of IP piracy?
Well, I mean, that is kind of the thing about the blockchain. People always say, why is that JPEG worth so much? Well, I mean, it's connected to a token that's individual and unique, and it's kind of like saying, I took a picture of the Mona Lisa. Right. Well, my picture isn't the Mona Lisa. So the other thing that happens a lot, and it's happened in art for years, look, how many people have knocked off Warhol to create, I mean, it's the same thing, that there is this concept of we'll take something great and we'll, create our versions of it. And I think that's just creativity, on one part of it. And look, everything's separated anyway. If you go to Foundation and Rareable and Super Rare, you're going to get a different kind of NFT. It's going to be fine art, and you're not going to have the same kind of imitation. If you're going to go to kind of more 10K drops, which are, the apes or every version of an ape or a duck or frog or whatever, you're going to see a lot of stuff that goes back to the original CryptoPunks in terms of the different characteristics. And this goes back to the collecting too. Some of those will win, some of them won't. I mean, doodles are not that different than cool cats, but they are. And, if you take a look at the Mofo FOMOs that launched this week, I mean, they're just amazing. And this kid is, a second generation Chinese American who grew up in Hawaii, and you see all of the cultural influences in those characters, and they're really beautiful. So, I mean, I think it's just fun to digest and understand, what these pieces are about. I'll tell you another thing. I spoke at the Asia Financial Forum a week ago, and before I did, I wanted to I had bought some Chinese NFTs. They were called Ready Player Cat from the Mao DAO, which was a creative community. And what I liked was with those NFTs, these guys put a bit of Chinese culture in it. So if you had a Ready Player Cat, you could actually do an airdrop and get a mooncake. I didn't know what the hell a mooncake was. And I'd been to China, quite a few times. But I love the cultural component.
Well, for context, what is it? What is that?
I guess it's a dessert
made
out of things like red bean paste, mung bean, and vodka, shit like that.
Okay.
And then you could upgrade it to a really complicated cake. And, there's really interesting stuff coming out of China. I just bought this NFT called an X-Rabbit. And it's based on, I think, an old Chinese cartoon. And it's just really, really cool. So, I mean, I just like looking at all this stuff. And with computer, it's easy to do.
That's awesome. All right, well, I lied. One more thing. Why has Bored Ape, because let's wrap on the NFT. Why do you think something like a Bored Ape has jumped out to have such extraordinary success?
Well, I think it was really the first one that perfected this concept of a roadmap and airdrops, initially, and the art was good, and it just struck a nerve. And I got mine, early. And when you get those, and then people are giving you kennel dogs and mutant apes and, the vials, that are going for so much money. And then there's this actual plan of how it's going to exist, with the game and the tokens that will be connected to it, and eventually probably a play to earn component. And, again, with the way the rights work, you see these things happening. You see Universal doing a licensing deal with owners, and not a company. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. As a matter of fact, 2 Chainz, who's a hip hop artist, did a animated Netflix style video that had a different set of Bored Apes in it. You have Jenkins, a pretty famous Bored Ape, doing this cool collaborative, entertainment stuff as well. So everyone who has one of these, it's more than just a Bored Ape. It's an identity in some ways, but it's also something that can go out there and create some revenue for you if you're clever about it. So I think that's why it struck a nerve.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to checking out the Metaverse at your recommendation. We'll see how that goes, but it's super exciting stuff. Thank you very much again for sharing all that. He is Les Borsai, the co-founder of Wave Financial. Les, thank you so much again.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and that's it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you dug the show, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get my new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.